So it's Good Vibrations, Mark Devlin on location in London today. If there's a few bangs and crashes in the background, forgive that. I was going to make a joke about there was an Australian, an American and an Englishman in a cafe, but that's not going to work. I'm talking today with Max Igan, researcher, speaker, radio show host, artist, musician, activist, proprietor of thecrowhouse.com. He's been one of our previous guests, and in a while we're going to be joined by Ken O'Keefe, former US Marine, a veteran of the First Gulf War, and also a speaker and activist. We're talking largely about the recent and current situation in Gaza and a few other things besides. And it feels quite topical to be talking about it today, and we've heard in the last 48 hours that there's a truce between Israel and Gaza. Max, welcome, first of all. Let me ask you, how much can we trust this truce, and do you feel this is just a kind of stalling before the next inevitable incursion by Israel, or is there positivity to be drawn from this news?
Well, I don't think it's stalling. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu was actually forced into this truce. He was backed into a corner by public opinion. It certainly wasn't the people of Israel that backed him into this corner. They're not very happy with what he's done. Whether it's a permanent thing is another question. This depends on the people of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is kind of facing a rebellion of his cabinet at the moment. He may even lose his job over this because his approval rating has dropped from about 80% down to about 35%, and that isn't because of the amount of people in Gaza he's killed, it's because he didn't kill enough. It's because they didn't go far enough. Benjamin Netanyahu was elected under the premise that Cast Lead did not go far enough, and Cast Lead was a brutal operation in 2008-2009. He was elected under the premise that needed to be finished, and he intended to finish the job. He's gone into Gaza now, and he's exterminated 92 entire families among the over 2,000 people that he's killed. It's about 2,100 people, or over that he's killed, over 500 children, and they're saying that he didn't go far enough. The problem that we're seeing with this is that it may be that his government gets overthrown, and whoever gets in, the next person just wants to finish the job. In regard to the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine, I think they won a huge victory with this, and they will make sure that peace is held. But some of the rockets that get fired over there, I don't think this is all Hamas. I think it serves Israel very much to have rockets fired over the wall, and all they need is one or two rockets fired over the wall, and they can start things up again. So it's a precarious truce, but the people, public opinion, the people of the world can stave off any future assaults by Israel if we don't drop the ball on this. We can't perceive it as being over. It would be nice if it is, but if we make like it is and we start taking positive steps to rebuild Gaza and get involved, then they won't really have a choice. They'll have to keep us satiated, I think. So they won't be able to go in there as eagerly as they hopefully or maybe want to.
And if there's any good to come out of this latest situation, I think that it's that Israel has really been showing its true colours and its lack of humanity for the rest of the world to see. And the general public does seem to be getting wise to what the game is. And I also think that Netanyahu underestimates the humanity of the rest of the world because psychopaths are incapable of humanity or of compassion. They are very bewildered by the empathy and compassion that is shown by other people in the world, and I feel it often shocks them and they don't quite know how to deal with it, and I think that's what we've seen happening here.
Well, we have, and it's going to be public opinion that does it again. It was public opinion that turned things around in Syria, and it's public opinion that turned this around in Gaza as well. The outcry on social media, one of the big results of this is that Benjamin Netanyahu's government has created millions upon millions of new Palestinian activists out of people that had never even heard of Gaza Strip before. It's been a huge blow to Israel what they've done, because it was brutal genocide. It was ethnic cleansing. Under anyone's standards, you don't go and kill children. And to have killed this many children with the weapons that they were using, dime ammunition, flèche bombs, white phosphorus, bombing schools, bombing UN food centres, bombing the waterworks, bombing the hospitals, bombing the power plant. These are all war crimes, and Israel has exposed itself as being a government that is prone to genocide, and that's an important thing. So in many ways, with all of the suffering of the Palestinian people, what the Benjamin Netanyahu government has done has been one of the greatest gifts it could ever have given to them. because they've made huge strides forward in the peace process from the Palestinian perspective. They've had a food truck go in there. Like a food truck went in from, or 26 trucks I think, went in from Kuwait, taking food packages and items that they hadn't seen in Gaza Strip since 2007 as a result of this conflict. And the outcry around the world has been absolutely phenomenal. And if they go back in there again, it will be the last blow to Israel. It really will. It'll bring about the implosion of the state of Israel, I believe, if they do push and go back in again.
Well, you know, that's the interesting thing, because knowing what we do about the game plan of Israel, the Zionist regime, presumably the plan is for them to go back in and finish the job. They've taken it as far as they feel they can at this stage, but I'm sure their long-term plan is to go back in, and they won't rest until Palestine is wiped off the map as far as they're concerned. But whether they're now going to be able to achieve that is debatable based on the response that we've seen to the latest incursion.
Well, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll succeed. I think Palestine's there to stay. I think Palestine will rebuild. I think Gaza will shine and blossom as a result of this. I really do. I don't think you'll ever hold the Palestinian people back. They're truly a bright light for the rest of the world. We should all pay attention to them. I mean, Israel will try. It will try to push the envelope. It'll try to go back in there, because that's always been the ultimate plan, to wipe out all of Palestine, and not only Palestine. They've got the Greater Israel Project. They want to take over all of the Arab countries. Really, they just don't want the Arabs there. And you know, it's imploding for them. It's not going to work. The world's waking up, and everything they do, they just make it more and more obvious to the rest of the world. And the great part about it is, with all of the Zionist control of the media, the control of the police forces and the governments, and everything they've got around the world, and the control of the money system, they're still losing. They're still losing with everything that they're doing and everything they have at their disposal. Everything they try just wakes more people up, and they get further and further backed into a corner.
Humanity will win the day.
They will. This is what happens when you have a victim mentality, because they've got this victim mentality. They believe the whole world's against them, and so they have to go and oppress everybody else, which turns the whole world against them. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you know, the world doesn't hate the Jews. It's a fallacy. It's a misconception that these people have, and it's inbred into people in Israel, unfortunately, that the whole world is populated by drooling Nazis who want to kill all the Jews. And it's not true. You know, the only problem is the Zionist government of Israel, which turns the rest of the world against the state of Israel. And this is again perceived as anti-Semitism when it isn't. It's just, you know, pro-life, really. I mean, you can't tolerate these sort of actions. You can't tolerate the murder of children. And there's a lot of Jews within Israel that feel the same. So it's a political issue. It's not a religious issue. It's not a racial issue. It's a political issue. It's just another totalitarian state flexing its muscles and believing it can control other people and kill who it likes, and it's not acceptable, regardless of who's doing it. You know, if it was Gaza was on the other foot, I'd be speaking out against the people of Gaza. Doesn't matter who it was. Whichever government thinks they can do this to people, it's not acceptable. You know, and that's the bottom line. Get rid of all of the religious and ethnicity about it, and you know, that's all irrelevant. It's about a political situation. It's about a bunch of psychopaths who are killing people, and it's not acceptable.
And what you often get is Israel bleating and moaning about the fact that its enemies want to wipe Israel off the map. That's a phrase you often hear. And yet the irony is that what we're seeing is Israel literally trying to wipe Palestine off the map and trying to reclaim all that land and turn it all into Greater Israel. So they're doing the very things that they accuse their enemies of constantly.
Well, they are, and the key word there is reclaim, because they're not actually reclaiming anything, they're just claiming it. And they've been wiping Palestine off the map and claiming Palestine as being theirs for the last 67 years, ever since the Nakba happened. And the problem is they don't even acknowledge the Nakba. That's why there's never been any strides forward in the peace process, excuse me, because Israel will not even acknowledge the expulsion of the 7 million Palestinians who are now living as refugees around the world. They just say that they went there and it was terra nullius, there was nobody living there. A bunch of Arabs hanging around, but they weren't Palestinians, they didn't really live here. It's a weird mentality they've got, but they won't acknowledge the dispossession of so many people. And that's why the peace process is always stalled right the way through, and it will never go forward until they acknowledge this problem, because that is the root of the whole problem. The Palestinian refugee situation. This is the root of the whole problem. And it's the one thing that is being left out. And even Yasser Arafat thought, up until 2000, He thought that land was going to be given back to the Palestinian people. And they promised it, and it's been suggested, but it never becomes part of the peace process. And that's why there's not going to be any solution until that fundamental problem is addressed.
So you tunnelled into Gaza in 2012, I believe, from Egypt. I've heard you on other radio shows talking about how you had to go through this series of tunnels, which sounds like quite an experience to have to go through to get in there. I know that you wanted to get into Gaza this time around, but there was just no way in. Just tell us a bit about what the experience was like of getting into Gaza last time around.
Well, we snuck in through, not through Hamas tunnels, we snuck in through rebel tunnels dug by teenagers so they could play with their friends in Egypt, basically. It wasn't one of these tunnels that you hear about, it was just kids. And we were crawling on our hands and knees for like an hour and a half to get in there. And what I found when I got in there was just beautiful people. I found a lot of children. I didn't find any terrorists. I just found normal, friendly people desperate for the world to hear them and desperate for the world to know that they're not terrorists. They're just living in this open-air prison. It was actually shocking to see the conditions that these people are forced to live in. And it was very sobering, And what I wanted to do with the Gaza Shield mission, the mission that I've got now, is actually, when I heard this conflict was erupting, I wanted to take a whole bunch of human shields in there to just say, hey, you can't bomb here, there's foreigners here. But Israel said quite openly they were giving no quarter to human shields at all. And even if I got the mission together, because of the massive destabilisation of the whole Arab region, it would have been impossible to get in anyway. So what the mission is focused on now is going there to help with the rebuilding process. I've got about 1,700 people signed up to the mission, but obviously I can't take that many people in. What I'm looking for at the moment as an initial group is people with medical skills, with building skills, people that can be very, very useful on the ground. The last thing I want to do is be taking people in there who we're going to have to find accommodation for when there's so many homeless people. We're going to be eating food when there isn't enough food there for the people that are there already. So I don't want to be going in there creating a problem. I want to be taking highly skilled people in there that can help with the rebuilding process. Another thing I want to do is I want to make a documentary. I want to search for a young girl that I met when I was in there. She was 8 years old at the time. Her name is Noor Samuni. I want to go in and find her and just bring her story to the world. I had intended on being in there in July, but it didn't work, obviously, because of the bombing campaign. And so I intend to go in there in October and complete the mission and make this film about her. But take people in there who've got specific skills and can help with the rebuilding process. I think it's very important that we do that. There's a lot of people want to go in and help, but again, like I said, if we're just taking people in there and we're sleeping in accommodation that other people need and we're eating food that when there isn't enough for the populace on hand at the time, well, that's just going to compound the problem. So you can't go taking a large group of people in there at the moment. It's got to be all highly skilled people. That's the plan for October. Yeah. I've spoken to people in there and I plan on going in as early as I can in October.
Is there going to be an option to cross the border in the conventional way then, as opposed to having to tunnel in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I will be definitely crossing the border in the conventional way. Like when we snuck in last time, I mean, this was a pretty crazy thing to do, to just kind of sneak into a war zone, and we didn't tell Hamas or anybody that we were coming. We just kind of snuck in there. They confiscated our passports when they found out we were there, kept them for 6 days. They detained us on the border and gave us a bit of a slap on the wrist. They were very nice about it. But I wouldn't do it again after being warned sort of about doing it that time. And I'd like the world to know that I'm going in there as well. I'll absolutely do it in the conventional way. Because like I said, I want to make a documentary about it all. And I don't think there'd be any tunnels left anyway. I think they bombed the hell out of the whole place. So I doubt that these rebel tunnels are there anymore.
And you had an experience at the hands of Hamas. I heard you talking about it on your Red Ice radio interview. And this organisation that we're told are brutal, bloodthirsty terrorists that have to be sought out and obliterated at every opportunity, according to Israel. What was your experience of your dealings with Hamas like?
Well, you've got to remember I broke into their country illegally and ran around with a video camera for 10 days, got up on YouTube and started making videos and posting them on YouTube to let the world know that I was there. When we went to the border, when they gave us our passports back and we went to the border, we got detained on the border. They said we would like to know where the tunnel is that you came in by, because it's one that they don't know about. And they don't like their borders being insecure, so they said they weren't going to let us leave until we told them where the tunnel was. Basically, they kept us in a room for about 4 or 5 hours talking to us. They provided me with numerous cups of tea and biscuits, and they were very nice about it. During the process, they sent our taxi driver away, who inadvertently took our luggage with him, and so we lost our luggage during the process. At the end of the day, after talking with us for a while and driving us around town, asking us if we could spot anywhere where the tunnel might be, they took us back to the border, they let us through, and then they found our lost luggage. Not only did they let us through, they provided a driver to get us back to Cairo safely, because it was quite dark by that time. It was getting dark. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they said it's not good for a couple of white guys to be crossing the Sinai at that time. So they provided us with the driver to get us back to Cairo safely. And then they located our lost luggage and they sent it after us with another driver. So that was delivered to us at the hotel in Egypt. So that was my experience with Hamas, the terrible terrorist organisation. Quite nice tea and bickies. Very conversational men.
Biscuits with terrorists.
Biscuits from terrorists, tea and bickies with Hamas, and they gave us a driver to get us home safely and sent my lost luggage after me. If I'd done this in Israel, I'd probably still be in jail. If I'd done it in Australia, I'd probably still be in jail. If I'd done it in England, I mean, you break into a country, you get caught by the authorities, they're not usually very kind to you. They don't usually provide you a driver and send your lost luggage on after you. So
well, that's true.
I think that they were very reasonable considering the circumstances.
Let me ask you what it was that first resonated with you about the whole situation in Palestine. What was it that really kind of spurred you and inspired you to get involved in quite a hands-on way?
Well, when I went in there, like I'd always heard about Gaza, it was always a magical place, a mystical place. It was something that always stuck in my mind ever since I heard the name when I was a kid. And I just always wanted to know about Gaza, and it was just the name, there's something about it. And when I got to England in 2012, I thought, well, how often am I going to be this close to Gaza and be with someone who can probably get me in? And so I just went for it. And I wanted to have a look. So I just went in to have a look. I didn't really know much about the Palestine situation. I knew that these people had been repressed for a long time. I knew that their land had been stolen, but I didn't really know much about it. I didn't know a lot about the Nakba. I didn't really know a lot about the culture. I just wanted to go in and have a look and see who these people were, what they were, you know. All this terrorism that we hear about in the world. Okay, well, what's supposed to be the most dangerous place on earth for terrorists? Gaza, let's go. So I went in to have a look, and it was mind-blowing. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I found out that absolutely nothing we've been told about the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, is true. I met the most honourable, the kindest, the most gentlest people I've ever met in my life, and I became a full-blown Palestinian activist from that point. The children that I met, though, I met so many children, so many homeless children with such a profound light in their eyes, you know, such old souls and such deeply respectful people, that I just thought, well, I've got to do something. I've got to tell the world what's going on here. And that was a real turning point for me. I didn't know why I was being called to go there. I just knew I was being called to go there. And I'm so glad I did. I put it down as the one of the most profound moments of my life, going to Gaza and just seeing the eyes of the children and experiencing that. Just hanging out for 10 days. Ken left me most of my own devices when I was in there. He was off doing stuff, and I was building school desks for the Samuni children, and just dealing with the local inhabitants and trying to deal with what it was like to get building supplies just to make these school desks. It was incredible. I couldn't get hold of saws, I couldn't get nails. It's just stuff like you can't get. It's impossible to do anything. And it really gave me a feeling of what it's like there. The electricity was off most of the day, like 16 hours a day the electricity was off. You know, having to buy bottled water, having salt water showers, seeing all the windows blown out in the buildings, and just seeing the amount of children everywhere. You know, it was a real eye-opening experience and a really profound experience, and I really can't wait to go back. I know it's going to be very devastated when I go back there. I don't even know if the building I was staying in is still standing, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to find Noor, and I'm going to bring a story to the world.
For anyone that is not able to physically get to Gaza themselves, be a part of your Gaza Shield project, or get there in any other way, what can people do to help in the overall process of restoring the dignity of the Palestinian people and the living conditions? Are there any ways in which people can actively get involved in improving the situation there?
Well, you can send them aid, but they don't really need aid. They need trade. They need the ability to be able to trade. So you can be a voice for them. I mean, they don't have a voice. They don't have a mainstream media. They don't have TV stations and any means of getting the word out to people. So you can be a voice. You know, with what's going on now, just because there's a truce and a ceasefire, don't drop the ball on this issue. You just keep going. They've got to be established as a proper nation, and they've got to be established with their own autonomy. They've got to have a port, they've got to have an airport, they've got to be able to trade with people. You know, we've been giving these people handouts and aid for years, and even Israel's been counting the amount of calories that can go in there. And this is pure psychopathy, you know, measuring how many people there are, how many calories each person needs, and that's how much we'll let in.
It's an obsession, isn't it? They're just obsessed with it.
It's incredible. It's incredible. So what people can do is continue to make noise and work for autonomy and trade, open trade. Even start trying to organise trade deals with them yourself. If you're a company out there, if you've got anything to sell and you've got anything to buy, see what produce they've got in Gaza and see what you can sell them. We've really got to start opening up trade channels with every possible means that we can. That's a really important thing. And keep writing to the Egyptian embassy. Make sure they keep Rafah border open, and keep pressure on our own governments to do something. See, what's going on here is a war crime. We can't drop the ball on that either. We've really got to make sure that the Netanyahu government is prosecuted for war crimes, because this could open up a doorway for us as well. Because once he's charged with war crimes, even if the charge doesn't stick, and often it doesn't because it's Israel, and they've got the power of veto and all of this sort of stuff. I mean, the United Nations is such a scam. But once charges are laid, even if he's charged, then that opens the floodgates. It gives us the ability to charge our governments with war crimes because they supported this war crime. And our governments aren't quite as safe as Israel when it comes to this. We've got laws in our own countries which can deal with this without even going to the United Nations. So this opens the floodgates. It's an opportunity for us, and a lot of Palestinians have died to give us this opportunity. So we've got to make sure the people that have carried out this crime are held accountable for it. We can't drop the ball on it.
Yeah, Netanyahu done for war crimes is a situation worth imagining.
It is.
On other matters which may or may not be related to what we've been speaking about, but often they are in a synchronistic kind of way, what do you make of the recent beheading video of James Foley at the hands of ISIS or ISIL or whatever the hell they're calling themselves this week? And we've also got this worldwide craze towards the ice bucket challenge, and many researchers have been kind of linking these two aspects, suggesting that there's some kind of synchronistic link between them, which may or may not be by design. I just wonder if you have any view on either of these two incidents and, you know, what's going on in this crazy, insane world of ours right now.
Well, look, I saw the beheading video when it was available, and it seemed to me to be absolutely fake. I don't know why they would fade to black when they started to do it, and when he started hacking at the guy's throat with this little knife, no blood came out. I mean, this is the jugular he's going for. There should have been torrents of blood. There was no blood. Then we've got this body sort of lying on the ground with a different knife to the one that was in his hand. I mean, this is obviously a fake video, and it gave America just the excuse it needed to go in and start bombing Iraq again. You know, and really, when you look at this, it's like a merry gun round. We've got ISIS in Syria, who are apparently the rebels who we are supporting, and we're funneling weapons to these people. And then we've got ISIS in Iraq, which we're bombing. Where is ISIS in Iraq getting their weapons from? They've got to run over the border to Syria all the time to grab the weapons that the US is supplying them in Syria. I mean, this is a complete joke. ISIS is just the latest boogeyman fabrication by Mossad and the CIA. I mean, Al-Qaeda's run out of steam. They had to create a new boogeyman, so this is what it is.
Al-Qaeda's so last year.
Oh, it is. It's very outdated. It's just so passé. We can't deal with that anymore, so we have to create a new one. And they give them these names. But ISIS sounds too pretty, so they changed it to ISIL pretty quick. You know, they're all nasty sounding names, aren't they? ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, you know, they all sound really nice, don't they? All sound nasty. It's just fiction. The whole lot is just a smokescreen. And as for the ice bucket challenge, I mean, hey, a lot of money's been made out of that one. I mean, there's a lot of money being funneled to CEOs who are being paid $300,000 a year.
Out of that one.
Oh, they are. They're making a lot of money out of that. One good offspin from it, I thought, was the Palestinian rubble bucket challenge that came out of it. They're pouring buckets of dirt over their heads, saying, we don't have any ice, we don't have any water.
That's right.
And you guys, you're just pouring it over your head, and we don't have any to drink. You know?
I wonder how many people have done that challenge now. Millions around the world, so that's millions of gallons of water just thrown away.
Just thrown away, wasted.
Good, clean water.
You can
just
wonder whether it's
no
some sort of a purification ritual before they slaughter everybody as well. You've got to wonder about that.
Well, that's what a lot of researchers have been suggesting.
Yeah, they do this sort of stuff, you know, and the whole thing's just a big money-making scam and get people to do silly things, you know.
And how quickly they fall for it?
How
quickly people jump on board just to be a part of the trend?
They do, but it fell on its ass pretty quick, you know, when people started picking it up and really looking at the CEOs and the wages that these people are getting. And I really believe the Rubble Bucket Challenge put a lot of a stop to it as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people saw the Palestinian Rubble Challenge. I was going to do one, actually, but the ceasefire was the next day. But if they start again, I reckon you'll see millions of people doing the Palestinian Rubble Bucket Challenge. I think that would really go viral. So they may have created a monster with this one, you know.
I'm waiting for the cliff jump challenge myself. Got a few nominations for that.
Yeah, politicians. It'd be good to have politicians step up.
And paedophiles.
Paedophiles, well,
no shortage of them.
Same camp, really, isn't it? You know?
Same thing, yeah.
So,
I mean, the incredible thing with the beheading video is that initially they were telling us that you've got this horrific video that's doing the rounds, and the police here in the UK were saying that you could be arrested for watching this video or downloading it or sharing it because it's so horrific we can't have you watching it, which is, you know, a line was crossed there because that is a thought crime. And what they're saying basically is you can't make the free will conscious decision as an adult as to what you watch anymore. But then when so many people were calling this video out for being so obviously fake, you then had the mainstream press running stories saying actually it was faked by ISIS for propaganda purposes, but James Foley did still die and they are still terrorists, and we do still need to go into Iraq and Syria to get them. So talk about having your cake and eat it. 1 minute they want you to believe the video is genuine, next minute they're telling you it's fake, but they still want the same outcome either way. It's just incredible.
Well, yeah, and what terrorist organisation is going to assassinate someone and then fade to black and then just produce a shot of the body with its head cut off? I mean, this is so Hollywood. It stinks of Hollywood. It stinks of a setup. It was probably done in Abu Ghraib, some studio that they set up in there in some prison somewhere. I mean, and he's just standing there calmly talking about all this. I mean, if someone's going to cut my head off, I'd be gnawing my way through their thighs or something. I mean,
are you going to cooperate with their propaganda if you're going to die anyway? Probably not.
Of course not. So the whole thing stinks of being staged. It really does. I mean. And again, it's just another excuse to go and kill more children and send more people off to die and bomb another country. I mean, that's what we do best, isn't it? We just bomb everywhere. So bringing democracy to the world, you know. It's such a fake video, and I would suggest that's why they're telling people not to watch it, because it's so obviously fake.
Exactly.
And people are watching it are expecting some gore, and there isn't any. You know, so why would they do that? There's been assassination videos that have been released by people before, and they're quite brutal. Why would they release something obviously so staged, you know?
It's so obvious to so many the way they play the game now. It really feels like they're losing and they're getting desperate and they're pulling everything out of the bag that they've got. It's the way it seems to me.
Well, it is. They're trying, but it's failing. Like I said, with everything they've got and everything they do, they're still failing. They're still losing in the battle. So, yeah, it can only look up from this point as long as people don't drop the ball. And like I said, there's been millions of new activists created from all of this. And people are seeing through the mechanism, and they're not even trying anymore. They've got the technology to make these things look real, and they don't. So you've got to understand, well, what is the higher purpose? You know, you really got to wonder, you know, because it's so fake. It's obviously fake.
It sometimes feels like they're trying to taunt those of us that can see that these things are fake. They deliberately make them able to be called out for what they are, because it feels like they want to rub your nose in it. Like, yeah, we know you can see that it's fake, but the vast majority of the population is still going to fall for it. So what are you going to do about that? That's the way it feels to me sometimes.
It does sometimes. They do it just to erode the confidence of the activists, because they say, hey, look how dumb these people are that you're trying to wake up. They fall for anything. And it can be, you know, a concern, but that's our society. But hey, it's all ammunition for us. It's all fuel that we can use. So, mate, bring it on. I don't think they can do anything that's going to work. I think eventually we're going to rise above all this. I don't think there's any holding the human spirit back, to be honest.
So, Max, just remind people where they can go to find all your information online in terms of your regular podcasts and articles and videos, and also the Gaza Shield initiative. Just remind us of the web portals for that.
Well, it's all on the crowhouse.com. Everything that I do or have or say or release is all on the crowhouse.com. There are links for everything there. You'll find a link to the Gaza Shield mission there. You'll find a link to the Full Circle project there. You'll find a link to my YouTube channel, to the Facebook groups. It's all there on the crowhouse.com.
What other work are you into at the moment? Has everything been put on hold in light of the Gaza situation, or do you have other projects on the go at the moment?
Well, I've got the Full Circle project, but Gaza's put a stop to a lot of it. I mean, the big project I've got at the moment is going to be the film To Find Noor. I've got a film called Earth Song that I'm halfway through making. I intend to finish that soon as well, but Gaza's the big thing at the moment, yeah.
So I'm talking now with Ken O'Keefe, researcher, speaker, activist, former US Marine. And we're going to continue talking about the situation in Gaza before we get on to other things. Ken has quite some experience of being in Gaza and being part of the infamous flotilla situation in 2010. We'll talk about that in due course. But first off, Ken, just what are your impressions of the situation that we have as we sit here recording today in terms of the truce that we've heard about between Israel and Gaza? What do you draw from that news?
Well, it's very, very clear to me that there have been drastic changes in the geopolitical environment that we're living in. Not to underscore the tremendous suffering of the people in Palestine, particularly in Gaza right now. I mean, we can hardly overestimate the amount of suffering. I mean, 92 families, something like that, are completely wiped out. Everybody in Gaza has family members who have been killed or maimed, injured. So there's no way to marginalize the amount of suffering that's occurred in Gaza. But there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever, and I've been saying it for several years now, that Israel is living on borrowed time, very much like the apartheid regime of South Africa, which found such incredible favor with President Ronald Reagan and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who both referred to Nelson Mandela as a terrorist and were giving political, economic, and other favor to the apartheid regime. If you had looked at the apartheid regime in the late 80s, you wouldn't have imagined that it would be no more within just a few years. And I'll make the argument that many, certainly right now and in the past, would think that Israel is almost an immovable force, that it ain't going anywhere. It's got the support of basically everyone in the West, all the puppet governments of the West. But if you ask me, the Jewish supremacist state of Israel will not exist in due course. There's no room for it, any more than there's any room for an Islamic supremacist state or any other type of state. You know, the next closest comparison to Israel, if you ask me, is Saudi Arabia. I think they're both pretty much bedfellows in every sense. They have a very similar kind of dogmatic outlook, and they also have very similar human rights abuses, and both of them are equally offensive to any sane human being. Yeah, I mean, there's just no question at all that people of the world are shocked by images of a captive population being bombarded. They were shocked during Operation Cast Lead as well. And this is something that I've said more than once, and it just shows the perversity and the injustice of our world that I can say such a thing, and that it, I would argue, is true. And the truth is that the best thing that happened to the Palestinian cause was Operation Cast Lead, because it really forced the people of the world to realize just how hideous the Israeli machine monster is. It really did go in and just, we watched, the world watched white phosphorus dropping on civilian populations. I've lived in Gaza. I've met children and adults hit by white phosphorus. I've met and befriended the Samuni family who went through absolute hell. I've met a lot of people in Gaza who've been through things that most in the West could not possibly imagine. And the whole world basically got a taste of what it is to be a Palestinian during Operation Cast Lead several years ago. The next best thing that happened to the Palestinian cause, in my opinion, was the Israeli attack on the Mavi Marmara. Once again, the whole world was forced to confront the fact that Israel is simply above the law in its own mind and finds such favor with Western powers, in particular the United States, my birth nation, that it is capable of doing these types of things with absolute impunity. It even attacked the USS Liberty back in 1967, and killed 34 American sailors, and most Americans don't even know anything about it. And they did it very intentionally, despite the official version saying it was an accident. The next best thing that happened to the Palestinian cause, if you ask me, is this latest operation. The reason why it's good for the Palestinian cause is because the whole world cannot ignore the fact that you have, once again, a captive population, over half of this 1.8 million being children, who are being exposed to what is absolute patent state-sponsored terrorism, state terrorism. It is an unbearably unjust, incredibly horrendous situation, and finally the world sees that. And really, this is where we get to the nitty-gritty. You know, at the end of the day, Netanyahu had very high approval ratings before this latest massacre. He has now dropped from roughly 80% to 20% approval. And the reason why his approval ratings are at 20% is because effectively the Israeli population overwhelmingly would have liked for him to go in and basically wipe out virtually every living thing in Gaza. There are large segments of the Israeli population that have been whipped up into such a supremacist, racist, psychopathic ideology that they really do feel that the best option would be to simply eliminate those who they feel are causing problems for them. Never mind the fact that they've been living as refugees since 1948, most of them, or many of them rather. Never mind the fact that they're living in conditions that no Israeli or any sane Western person would tolerate for a second. Never mind the fact that they're being tortured, imprisoned. Never mind the fact they're being massacred regularly. The Israeli population overwhelmingly, and I don't say this with any disregard for those that do not feel the same way, because there are Israelis who do not feel this way, but sadly they are in the extreme minority. The vast majority of the Israelis wanted Netanyahu. Effectively, many of them would have been very happy for him to go in and nuke the whole place. So what we have is a situation that is extremely dangerous, and is still going to be dangerous, because even if Hamas managed to control every single thing that happens in Gaza, which it can't possibly do, Israel could institute a false flag and fire a rocket into Israel from Gaza through one of its agents or assets, and here you go again. They'll have the excuse to start this up.
So, if this is the end of Netanyahu's career, they would have no problem putting another psychopath in place to finish the job as they see it.
This is something, you know, and when you talk about this, and when you say the word Jew instead of Zionist, you know, and you speak the way I do, you know, you fall into a seeming trap. But I would argue that the reason why we must use the most accurate terms to communicate what is really happening is because political correctness and self-censorship does nothing in the terms of us understanding what is really going on. Most of the Israeli population, of course, 80% of the Israeli population is Jewish, 20% is Arab, Palestinian. Of the 80%, overwhelmingly, the majority of them have subscribed to a very virulent form of Jewish supremacism, which effectively pits them as the chosen people and everyone else is unchosen. Many of them subscribe to Talmudic Jewish beliefs, such things as Jesus Christ is boiling in hot excrement in hell, that the fingernail of one Jew is worth more than all of the rest of humanity. These are not extreme perspectives in terms of what many feel in Israel. In fact, the types of things that most would find absolutely insane are passing for normal in Israel. And this is exactly why the population would have been all too happy, overwhelmingly, for Netanyahu to exterminate the population. This is something that presents a danger not just to the Palestinians, but to the world by virtue of the fact that Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons. We must be aware of this, and we must get rid of political correctness and speak very frankly about what is happening. Jewish supremacism is every bit as dangerous as racial supremacism, national supremacism, or any other kind of supremacism, especially when you combine it with the kind of power that Israel has today.
And you get horrific images of Israeli children signing their name on bombs that are going to go over the border into Palestine. The level of brainwashing and mind control that's been done on these people just defies belief. Let me just ask you, you were a part of the Gaza flotilla raid in May 2010, the flotilla that attempted to sail from Cyprus, I believe it was, to bring emergency aid and supplies into Gaza. you just want to tell us a bit about what that experience was like?
Well, in short, the experience was really a great blessing to be around people who, effectively all of us, I think, 30 plus nations were represented, but all of us had one very distinct thing in common, and that was that we simply couldn't sit by and continue to watch our brothers and sisters in Palestine, specifically Gaza, being treated in an inhumane way, an illegal, unlawful way, an unjust way, and a simply unacceptable way. We had to do something, and that was the thing that brought us together. I'm sure we could have disagreed on many different subjects, but on this we all agreed. And to be in that environment with people who felt the same kind of way, who were willing to take significant risks to do what needed to be done, was a great honor and blessing. I feel so blessed to have been there. The experience, of course, was very traumatic for most people. I've been in combat before, so this wasn't too extreme from my perspective. I basically just went about my business the best I could under these circumstances, but there was blood, there were people murdered, executed. We had a fighting force of the very best that Israel had to offer, the Navy SEALs of Israel, the very best of the best, coming onto a ship, heavily armed, and literally shooting and executing people. And we carried ourselves with as much honor and dignity as we could. We disarmed 3 of their commandos. I personally was involved in 2 of those disarmings, took possession of one of the weapons, a 9mm pistol from one of those commandos. And by virtue of that, we saved life because we literally took weapons away from 3 of the murderers who had come on board. So, of course, the BBC and all the mainstream media did all they could to try and cast us as the aggressor, as
Terrorists.
a potential threat, terrorist sympathizers or terrorists ourselves. In fact, after I was released from Israel from this experience, the Israeli Defense Forces issued a press release, which is still on the internet to this day, which declared that I, Kenneth O'Keefe, was an operative of the Hamas terrorist organization, and I was traveling to Gaza to train a commando unit for Hamas. So, this is as ridiculous as the accusations of basically everybody on the ship. There may have been 1 or 2 people, perhaps, who were plants, who were working with the CIA, Mossad, who were the real terrorists, pretending to be terrorists like we see in the Islamic State today. These idiots are working for the CIA, whether they know it or not. So there may have been one of those people on board the ship, but they certainly weren't there by invitation of the organizers of the event. We had no interest in carrying weapons or terrorists. We had every interest in expressing our humanity and showing the people of Palestine that they are not forgotten.
And a week in an Israeli jail. Not exactly the Tel Aviv Hilton, I guess.
Yeah, I've been in jail now. I spent 20 days in Israeli jail back in 2004. I was also, beaten at that point, abused, but, still nothing compared to what Palestinians deal with every single day. So no one need cry an extra tear for me. The 7 days that I spent in Israel, again, I was beaten on 2 different occasions. But again, still nothing compared to what Palestinians are dealing with every day. But it shows that, the Israeli state really fears nothing with regard to any kind of repercussions for its actions. And this is what I believe is finally going to change, especially with this last massacre in Gaza. I feel that people understand now we must demand that there is accountability and that charges are brought against the leaders in Israel, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and actually the crime of genocide, because the attacks, which were known to be killing roughly 80% civilians to 20%, which I don't believe it's even close to 20% of militants, defenders of Palestine. But even if we accepted figures, 80% that were being killed were civilians, and this was known very early in the campaign. So Israel was happy to knowingly kill 80% civilians to 20% combatants. That is genocide by any legal, lawful, sane definition of the word. They committed genocide as well. So unless those charges are brought in the International Criminal Court, I think we as people are going to absolutely dismantle the International Criminal Court, dismantle the UN if necessary, unless the 5 permanent members and the veto powers of the Security Council are eliminated and serious reforms are made so that every kind of decision made by the United Nations is actually in line with the will of the people of the world and actually serves the mission of the UN, which is to eliminate or at least reduce significantly violent conflict. whole point of the United Nations is to provide a forum by which nations can settle their disputes without resorting to war. The United Nations has failed so miserably in terms of what it declares its purpose is, and if we don't insist on reforms at both the UN level and the International Criminal Court and insist on accountability, then really there is no chance that we're going to prevent the next massacre. It will happen. It's a matter of when, not if. But I believe this is it. I believe we've reached a point now where people have said to themselves, I cannot accept this in good conscience. I must be part of changing this world for the better, because what we see in Palestine is going to be what's happening in our neck of the woods very soon if we don't sort this mess out. Soon, a world war, a nuclear war, could be very, very possible reality unless we have international law and accountability. I believe this is what's going to happen from this point forward.
There's going to be some very interesting weeks and months ahead for sure to see what pans out from all of this. And I think so many people have got wise to the fact that what we've witnessed over the last few weeks is not a war or a conflict as it's portrayed in the mainstream media. It's, as you said, straight genocide, clear cut, straight, no other way of looking at it. I just want to backtrack slightly and ask you what it was about your experiences in the first Gulf War, because you're a veteran of that particular conflict, 1991. What was it about that which caused you to wake up and be able to see through all the deceptions and manipulations that are spun for us about how the global game is played? What was it that allowed you to come to understand what you were really being used for and what you were a part of?
I'd love to give you some very sort of romantic story about how it was, how I saw war and realized how wrong it was, but that's not actually what happened for me. When I joined the Marine Corps, I did so not because I wanted to go off to a war, but because I felt I was lacking in discipline and initiative. I had been brainwashed into believing in the United States, the greatest nation in the world, freedom and democracy and all that sort of stuff. So when I joined the Marine Corps, I also thought that honor and integrity and leadership by example were inherent in the Marine Corps. Of course, I was a complete idiot. That's just indoctrination and propaganda speaking. Anybody with half a brain.
We all fall for it. I sure did.
We do, and I'm happy to admit that. I'm happy to further admit that I didn't figure it out during the Gulf War, and that's not where I figured out what was wrong with America. Okay. And I'm happy to say that because I don't look down on people who, in my opinion, are very stupid, because I'm one of those people. I was very stupid.
Me too.
And I've managed to see the world in a more accurate way, in a way that I think is much more conducive to providing a future for our children, and I think a more intelligent, wise way. If we were stupid yesterday doesn't mean we have to be stupid today. So when I say, and I use these words, which are sort of politically incorrect, I do so not because I'm arrogant, but because I acknowledge myself as stupid as well. And if I happen to become more wise, and I grow and learn, doesn't mean that everyone else should be doing it in tandem with me. So I can understand the people of today who don't get what's going on.
Everyone's at their own pace.
Everyone's at their own pace. So I actually, what happened to me was, while I was in the Marine Corps, I ended up speaking out about abuse of power. I did so because I believed in leadership by example. When I spoke out about those who were in leadership position above me, I did so openly, which I felt was the honorable thing to do rather than do it secretly. I was very naive in terms of what I thought honor and integrity really had nothing to do with the way I experienced the Marine Corps. In fact, I did an honorable thing and was punished very severely. And when I was punished severely for doing the right thing in the Marine Corps, this was a very traumatic experience. It happened on a ship. We were out in the middle of the sea for 90 days, 3 months at one point. I was hated by people in my platoon and in my unit because they were being punished because I spoke out. I was effectively a whistleblower, and we know what happens to whistleblowers. So, instead of just punishing me, they punished all of the people in my platoon, which ended up making them hate me. If you've ever seen the movie Full Metal Jacket, then you might recall that Private Pyle, the problem, the fat one who was getting punished by the drill instructor, eventually the drill instructor then punishes not Private Pyle, but the entire platoon.
It's what they do in schools with a naughty school kid.
It is, exactly. This is a very, very effective way to control people. And when that happened to me, we were then, shortly after that, we were sent to the Gulf War. And I realized that I was in a position that I had volunteered for. I had been stupid enough to volunteer for this. And now, because I had done the honorable thing, I was hated by the platoon commander or platoon sergeant in charge of me. And in the Marine Corps infantry, trust me, if your platoon sergeant hates you, he can make your life hell. If he hates you and you're in a war, hell, he can give you a lawful order to go charge that machine gun nest. And if you don't do it in a time of war, according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, literally, you could be executed according to Uniform Code of Military Justice, military law. So I had to confront this reality. Not only was I looking at the mortality, my own mortality in terms of facing a war, as everyone else was, but I also had people in charge of me who could put me in harm's way. At one point, actually, we had a drill for a chemical attack. We didn't know if it was real or not. And guess who was the first one to be asked to pull off the mask and see? Me. So that's an example of what I went through. When I realized all this stuff, it reframed my outlook on America, because if the Marine Corps is nothing close to what I thought it was, perhaps America isn't quite what I thought it was. So it changed my mindset, and after I got out of the Marine Corps, I commenced to a course of independent study. I read books like Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, the autobiography of Malcolm X, A People's History of the United States, and I realized, oh my God, I've been lied to my whole life. And it was in that period, after I got out of the Marine Corps, that I started to realize that basically everything I'd been told was exactly the opposite of the truth.
Where were you at by the time of 9/11? Were you able to see through the lies and deception of that particular event? Because you were talking back there about admitting that you'd been stupid and been duped, and that you'd fallen for the big lie. And I certainly did when it came to 9/11. You know, I was as dumbed down and moronic and as much of a drone as they come, because I swallowed the official line of that for many years, didn't know any better, took Osama bin Laden to be the enemy on the US government say-so. I just wonder what your personal experiences were of 9/11.
I got out of the Marine Corps in 1992. I started my independent study in the early to mid 90s, and I'd say by the mid to late 90s, I had become capable of seeing the truth, and therefore it really was only a matter of studying more of the details. But most important of all, rather than knowing all of the details, is identifying the pattern. And what I recognized by the mid-90s was the pattern. So by the time 9/11 happened, the pattern is, the first question that you should ask, if anything like that happens, is who benefits, cui bono? And if you don't ask that question, then you're not capable of thinking for yourself just yet. Because you're told something doesn't mean you should simply believe it. You know, if you're a critical thinker, you will, and especially you have to be aware of your source. So if the U.S. government tells me that this is Arab fundamentalist terrorists and so on and so forth, first off, I'd be foolish to just simply believe that at face value, but I'd also be further foolish to ignore very important things, which I was aware of at the time, such as the Project for a New American Century, an agenda of full spectrum dominance. This had already been declared, and so I didn't know exactly what happened on 9/11. How could I, of course? Only those that were in the inside, the most inner circle, would know that. But I knew it was a false flag event of some kind, and I was in Hawaii, the stolen nation of Hawaii, which is part of America right now. And when I looked at Americans and the way they were being whipped up, in the world for that matter, was being whipped up into this knee-jerk response, which was totally stupid given the history of false flag events, I literally fled Hawaii. I lived in paradise, on the beach, had my own business, making money, diving, whale watching business. You know, what my job was fantastic. You know, most people would kill for it, and I left that and sought political asylum in Holland, where I knew nobody at all, and basically gave up a life most would kill for in Hawaii. I did that because I could see how extremely stupid and manipulated the American public was, and I knew I was incapable of being silent about this, and I knew I would end up in prison for something I didn't do. I was already in trouble. I had renounced my U.S. citizenship already earlier in 2001. I had written several pages specifically explaining why I despised the U.S. government for everything that it was doing and how I had no allegiance to it. So, you know, I was already a target, and then 9/11 happened, so I had to go. I announced on live television, CNN, back in 2003, the first opportunity I got in January 2003. These are mild words now, but in 2003, to say on live television on CNN, which I'm not aware of anybody else even coming close to saying, I am implicated the U.S. government, said if they weren't actively involved in it, I am quite sure that they were aware of it. You know, I'll say now for sure, I'll give specifics about it, but at the time, you know, that was quite extreme to even say that. So I was aware, and I saw where it was going, and that's why I initiated the Human Shield Action to Iraq, because I knew it was coming to Iraq, and I knew it was ugly, and I couldn't sit by and do nothing.
All right, Ken. Well, much respect for all you do, brother, and thanks for joining us today. Much appreciated.